Something significant just happened inside one of the most recognizable names in online commerce. A company that helped define internet marketplaces is cutting hundreds of jobs, again, even as it spends billions expanding into the future of retail. The company is eBay. Roughly 800 employees are being laid off, about 6% of its full-time workforce. Another major workforce reduction in a pattern that has now repeated for several consecutive years. But the timing is what makes this moment different. Because these layoffs are not happening during a downturn. They are not being driven by collapsing revenue. They are not the result of financial distress. They are happening just days after the company committed $1.2 billion in cash to acquire a fast-growing fashion resale platform, Depop, from Etsy. On one side of the balance sheet, hundreds of jobs eliminated. On the other side, a billion-dollar expansion bet. This is not contraction. This is restructuring. And it reflects a deeper shift underway across the technology and retail economy, a shift in how mature digital platforms are redefining growth, efficiency, and survival in an increasingly competitive marketplace. To understand what's happening, you have to look beyond the layoffs themselves and examine the strategy behind them. Because this is not the first time the company has cut staff in recent years. About a year earlier, roughly 1,000 positions were eliminated, close to 9% of the workforce at that time. The year before that, another 500 roles disappeared. Now another 800. 3 consecutive years of reductions. This is not temporary adjustment. This is structural recalibration. And it's happening while performance metrics are improving. Recent quarterly results showed stronger than expected earnings. Revenue climbed significantly year over year, reaching billions of dollars and surpassing analyst projections. So why reduce headcount when financial performance is strengthening? Because modern corporate strategy is no longer driven solely by revenue growth. It is driven by where growth is expected to come from next. And in this case, leadership appears to believe the future of online commerce is not in traditional marketplace expansion, but in Recommerce. Recommerce is the resale economy, secondhand goods, circular consumption, platforms where previously owned items become primary inventory. It is one of the fastest growing segments of global retail. Consumers increasingly view resale not as a compromise, but as a preference, driven by sustainability concerns, economic pressure, and shifting cultural attitudes toward ownership. Fashion resale, in particular, has become a major battleground. Younger consumers are building entire wardrobes through secondhand platforms. Brand discovery, identity expression, and social signaling now flow through resale ecosystems that operate very differently from traditional retail channels. That is where Depop enters the picture. Depop is not just another resale platform. It is a social commerce environment. Users do not simply buy and sell. They curate, promote, and build personal brand identity through what they trade. It blends marketplace mechanics with community dynamics. Style, culture, and peer influence are embedded directly into the transaction model. For a legacy marketplace trying to stay relevant with younger consumers, that kind of platform represents more than acquisition value. It represents demographic access, and demographic access is strategic survival. The purchase signals that leadership is reallocating resources toward growth segments that are expanding faster than the company's traditional core. But reallocating resources means exactly that, moving capital, focus, and organizational structure from one area to another, which often means eliminating roles that no longer align with where the company intends to compete. Corporate language describes this as aligning structure with strategic priorities. In operational reality, it means removing parts of the organization built for yesterday's model in order to fund tomorrow's. This dynamic is not unique to one company. It is happening across the technology sector, across retail, and across digital platform businesses more broadly. Mature companies face a structural dilemma. They must maintain profitability in established operations while investing aggressively in emerging markets that may define future relevance. The solution is often simultaneous expansion and contraction. Buy growth, cut cost, reallocate talent, redesign infrastructure. That is exactly what is happening here. The company is effectively shrinking parts of its existing workforce while purchasing an entirely new operating ecosystem built around a different consumer behavior model. And the geographic center of this restructuring matters as well. The company is based in San Jose, a region long associated with technological reinvention. Businesses headquartered there operate under relentless pressure to evolve faster than competitors, often making rapid structural changes before market conditions force them to act early, move decisively, optimize continuously. That philosophy shapes how workforce decisions are made. Employees are not only measured against current operational needs, they are evaluated against anticipated strategic direction, where the company intends to be, not just where it currently operates. When that direction shifts, workforce composition shifts with it. The human impact of that shift is profound. For affected employees, layoffs represent sudden disruption, career uncertainty, financial stress, identity displacement. For the organization, they represent resource reallocation, an adjustment in cost structure and capability distribution. Those two perspectives coexist, but they are rarely aligned emotionally. Corporate statements typically emphasize gratitude, respect, and support for impacted workers. These statements are standard and often sincere, but they exist alongside decisions driven by competitive positioning, capital efficiency, and long-term growth modeling. And investors often respond positively, because from a financial standpoint, simultaneous cost reduction and strategic acquisition signal disciplined capital management. Remove expenses from declining or stable segments. Invest heavily in expanding ones. Markets reward perceived future growth more than present stability. That logic explains why layoffs can occur alongside strong earnings, and why acquisitions can follow immediately after workforce reductions. It also reflects a broader economic pattern. Across major industries, companies are becoming more selective about what kinds of growth they pursue. Expansion for its own sake is no longer sufficient. Growth must be targeted, focused on segments with high engagement, strong demographic momentum, and scalable network effects. Resale fashion platforms check all those boxes. They are culturally embedded, digitally native, highly social, and aligned with evolving consumer values around sustainability and cost consciousness. For a global marketplace seeking long-term relevance, entering that space at scale is not optional. It is strategic necessity, but entry requires capital. Integration requires restructuring, and restructuring often requires layoffs. This cycle, acquisition, reorganization, workforce reduction, is becoming a defining feature of modern corporate evolution, not decline, transformation. And transformation rarely occurs without displacement. The deeper question is whether this model represents temporary adjustment or a permanent feature of how large digital platforms operate moving forward. If technological change continues accelerating, companies may increasingly treat organizational design as fluid rather than stable, constantly resizing, reshaping, and redirecting talent based on shifting competitive landscapes. Employment becomes dynamic rather than fixed. Structure becomes modular rather than permanent. Strategy becomes continuous rather than episodic. From that perspective, repeated workforce reductions over multiple years do not signal instability. They signal ongoing adaptation. The company is not shrinking overall, it is changing form. Traditional marketplace infrastructure is being streamlined, new commerce ecosystems are being acquired, consumer engagement models are being redefined, and the organization itself is being rebuilt to support that transition. The layoffs are one visible consequence of that rebuild. The billion-dollar acquisition is another. Together they tell a single story, a mature digital platform repositioning itself for the next era of online commerce, even if doing so requires repeated internal disruption. For observers, investors, and workers across the technology and retail sectors, the implications are clear. Corporate growth no longer guarantees employment stability. Financial success does not prevent restructuring. Expansion and contraction can happen simultaneously, and increasingly often do. The modern company is not a fixed entity. It is a continuously adjusting system. And right now, one of the most recognizable names in online marketplaces is adjusting again, reducing its workforce, purchasing new growth engines, and reshaping itself for a future where resale, community-driven commerce, and demographic relevance may matter more than the marketplace model that built its original success. 800 jobs eliminated. $1.2 billion invested. A company redefining where it believes the future of retail is heading and restructuring itself to get there first.